My name is Nora Ellison, and I am 37 years old, and for 14 years, I paid my parents' bills without telling them and without telling anyone else, and without receiving acknowledgement, because acknowledgement was not possible when nobody knew. I want to start with the number because the number is what makes the story real, and because without the number, the story sounds like an exaggeration of the kind that people use to communicate emotional truth rather than factual truth. The number is not an exaggeration. 14 years, 168 consecutive months, a mortgage payment, a utility bundle, and a monthly household contribution that I routed through a third-party payment service so that my name did not appear on any statement my parents received. They never knew it was me. They attributed the stabilization of their finances to various explanations over the years: a bank adjustment, a pension correction, what my father called a streak of good luck that he had the specific wisdom not to examine too closely. I found out about the financial situation in the way you find out things your family does not want you to know, by accident during a visit. I was 23. I had started my first real professional job 3 months earlier, and I was home for a weekend, and I was looking for a stamp in the kitchen drawer, and instead I found a stack of envelopes I was not supposed to see. Mortgage notices, utility shut-off warnings, the kind of correspondence that arrives in envelopes with red accents and language designed to communicate urgency without being dramatic about it. 4 months behind on the mortgage, 2 months behind on the electric, the kind of shortfall that compounds if nothing changes. I put the envelopes back where I found them. I went home on Sunday, I sat at my kitchen table, and I looked at my own budget, and I ran the numbers twice, and I set up the payments. I was 23 years old, and I made a decision in 48 hours that I maintained without a single interruption for the next 14 years of my life. Not because it was easy, because the alternative was watching my parents lose the house they had lived in for 26 years, and I could not make myself choose the alternative when the numbers showed that I could prevent it. I want to be honest about what 14 years costs. Not in money, though the money was significant, and the math of what I could have built if those transfers had gone to my own future rather than to my parents' present is a calculation I have done and will not dwell on here. I want to be honest about what it costs in terms of the life you build around a fixed financial reality that nobody else in your life knows about. The apartment I did not upgrade where I could have, the trips I did not take, the savings account that grew slower than it should have, the specific daily arithmetic of a person who is living on less than she earns because she has decided that what she earns belongs partly to something she cannot explain to anyone. Nobody knew. Not my friends, not my colleagues, not my sister Carla, who was building her own life in Phoenix with the specific freedom of a person who does not have a monthly transfer draining her discretionary income. Not my parents, who thought they were recipients of luck rather than of their eldest daughter's financial discipline. Then, one Thursday evening in October, my parents called with news. My mother's voice on that Thursday call had the quality it takes when she has organized herself around something and is delivering it rather than discussing it. Warm and clear and slightly faster than usual, the voice of someone who has made a decision and is now informing the relevant parties. She said they'd been thinking about the future. She said at their age, it made sense to start planning ahead. She said they had talked to their attorney and they were going to add Carla's name to the house deed. Carla was going to move back to help manage things. The arrangement was practical, and they hoped Nora would understand, because Carla had always been closer in proximity, and the situation called for someone who could be physically present. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, I said I understood. I said I needed to think about some things. I said I would call back. I sat at my kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had made the decision 14 years ago, and I thought about 168 consecutive months of transfers. I thought about the red accented envelopes in the kitchen drawer and the 23-year-old who had found them and had not hesitated. I had not been hesitating for 14 years. I had been deciding, continuously, every month, to maintain a thing I had started because I believed it was the right thing, and because the alternative was something I could not choose. The house that my parents were adding Carla's name to had been kept above their heads for 14 years by the daughter whose name was not going on any document. I called my sister the next day, not to deliver information, to ask a question. I asked whether Carla had known about the financial situation in the early years. She said, "What financial situation?" I said, "Never mind." I called my attorney the following week, not to sue anyone, not to file anything, to understand my options, and to understand the conversation I was about to have, and to understand what the next chapter looked like when the previous chapter ended. She walked me through the situation with the same practical clarity that good attorneys bring to situations that are emotionally complex but legally straightforward. Then I called my parents on a Saturday morning and I told them the truth. I said I needed to tell them something that I had been keeping for 14 years. I said that I had been paying their mortgage and utilities since I was 23. I said I had set up the arrangement after finding the overdue notices in the kitchen drawer during a weekend visit. I said I had paid every month without exception for 168 months. I said I was telling them now because the phone call about the deed had clarified something for me that I needed them to understand. My mother went very quiet in a way I had never heard from her before. Not the managed quiet of someone composing their response, the genuine quiet of someone absorbing information that is reorganizing everything they thought they understood. My father said nothing for approximately 30 seconds. Then he said one word. He said, "How?" I explained how. The third-party payment service, the routing that kept my name off their statements, the way I had structured the transfers so they arrived at consistent intervals that my parents had attributed to pension adjustments and bank corrections. I explained it the way you explain a system you built carefully and maintained meticulously, clearly and without apology, because there was nothing to apologize for. My mother said, "Why did you not tell us?" I said I had reasons. I said the first reason was that telling them would have changed the nature of the support, that knowing it was me would have created a debt they would have felt, and a guilt that would have complicated everything, and I had not wanted to create those things. I said the second reason was that I had not been sure they would accept it. My parents had a specific relationship with their pride, and I had not trusted that the pride would permit acceptance of what I was offering. My father said, "You should have said something." I said, "I agree." I said, "I am saying something now." Then I said the thing that had brought me to this conversation, the thing the Thursday phone call about the deed had made unavoidable. I said, "The house that Carla's name is being added to has been kept by my transfers for 14 years. I am not saying that to make a claim on the property. I am saying it because it is true, and because I believe you should have accurate information when you are making decisions about the future of an asset that my money has been maintaining since I was 23. The silence that followed was the longest of my entire life. I have estimated it at approximately 45 seconds. It felt considerably longer. My mother said, "Does Carla know?" I said, "No." She said, "How is that possible?" I said, "Because I never told anyone." My father's voice, when he finally spoke, had the specific quality of a man who has understood something enormous and is still inside the understanding rather than on the other side of it. He said, "Nora, just my name, the way people say names when the name is the only word that fits the moment." I said, "I am not going to stop the transfers as a punishment. I said I am going to stop them because 14 years is a very long time, and because the phone call about the deed told me that the arrangement had run its course, and that continuing it would be a different kind of choice from the one I made at 23. I said, "I think it is time to have a real conversation about what the house situation actually looks like, and what the family's actual plan is, and what the realistic options are going forward." I said I was willing to be part of that conversation. I said I would not be part of any plan that was built on an assumption about my continued support that nobody had ever confirmed with me directly. My mother said, I did not know. I said, I know you did not. She said, I would never have, and she stopped. I said, I know. That is why I am telling you now rather than later. Carla found out 4 days later. My parents called her. I do not know exactly what they said, but I know the version they conveyed produced a phone call from Carla to me that arrived on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. Her voice had a quality I had not heard from her before, not the confident, easy register she usually operated in. Something more careful, like someone who is reassessing the ground they are standing on and is not entirely sure it is where they thought it was. She said, "Is it true?" I said, "Yes." She said, "All of it?" I said, "All of it." She said, "How much?" And I told her the cumulative number, the total of 168 months of mortgage and utilities. The number is significant, and I will not share it here because it belongs to my financial history rather than to this story. But I will tell you that when I said it out loud to my sister, it produced a silence that had a specific texture to it, the texture of someone understanding something about the previous 14 years that retroactively changes the shape of what those years looked like. Carla said, "I did not know." I said, "I know." She said, "I thought they were just managing." I said, "They were not managing, I was managing." She said, "Why did you not tell me?" I said, "Because at the beginning I did not want to burden you, and as the years went on, I did not know how to introduce the information without it becoming something else entirely." She said, "Something else like what?" I said, "Like this conversation." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The deed?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I did not know about the financial history when they offered that." I said, "I believe you." She said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "I want an honest family conversation, and I want accurate information on the table when decisions are made." She said, "Okay." She said, "I will call them." I said, "Thank you." The family conversation happened 2 weeks later on a video call that my parents organized with the specific nervous efficiency of people who understand that something significant is happening and are not entirely sure of their footing. My father had prepared notes. My mother had made tea at whatever time it was in their house and had the mug in her hand throughout. I had nothing prepared. I had the 14 years. My father opened by saying they had not known, and that if they had known, they would have done things differently. I said, "I know." I said, "I believe that." I said, "The question is not about what you would have done differently. The question is about what we do now." My mother said, "What do you want?" I thought about the question for a moment. I said, "I want honesty." I said, "I want decisions about shared assets made with accurate information about who has been contributing to those assets and how." I said, "I want to be part of conversations about the future rather than learning about them in phone calls that present decisions as already made." Nobody argued with any of that. There was nothing to argue with. The house conversation took 3 months to resolve properly. My parents worked with their attorney to revise the deed situation in a way that reflected a more accurate accounting of the family's financial history. The specifics belong to my family, and not to this story. What I will tell you is that the revision was made with all 3 of us present, and with accurate information on the table, and that for the first time in 14 years, the decisions being made about my family's assets were being made based on what was actually true. Carla and I are different now than we were before October. Not enemies, not estranged, different in the specific way that relationships change when both people have accurate information about the previous 14 years and are doing the work of recalibrating based on what they actually know rather than what they assumed. She said to me once, about 2 months after the video call, that she was grateful I had told her and that she understood why I had waited as long as I had, and that she would have been angry if our positions had been reversed. I said I understood. She said I should have been paying more attention. I said, the information was not available to you. She said, I should have asked more questions. I said, I agree. My parents and I have a relationship that is honest in a way it has never been. My mother asked me once why I had done it, meaning the 14 years, and I told her the truth, which was that I had found the envelopes and looked at the numbers and made a decision in 48 hours because the alternative was watching something I loved deteriorate, and I could not watch that. She said, "You have always been the strong one." I said, "I have always been the one who decided to be strong. Those are different things, and I need you to understand the difference because being the strong one has a cost, and the cost is real, and it needs to be acknowledged rather than assumed." She said, "I acknowledge it." She said it simply and directly, without the performance of apology that sometimes makes acknowledgement feel like a transaction. She just said it. I have stopped the transfers. That chapter is closed. What replaced it is a set of arrangements that are formal and discussed and agreed upon rather than unilateral and secret and maintained by one person's decision. The arrangements are less than I was providing. They are sustainable. They are honest. They are built on what is actually true, rather than on what I was quietly compensating for while nobody asked whether I was okay. I was okay. I want to be clear about that, because I do not want this story to be misread as a story about a woman who suffered in silence. I built a career and a life and a set of friendships that sustained me across 14 years. I was functional and in many ways flourishing. What I was not was seen clearly by the people who should have been seeing me most clearly. That is what changed. Not my circumstances, not my well-being. The seeing. 14 years of being unseen by the people who were supposed to see me most clearly, followed by one phone call about a deed, followed by a conversation I should have had years earlier, followed by the specific relief of being accurately known. That is what this story is about, not the money, the seeing. It was worth waiting for. I just should not have had to wait 14 years. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.